Welcome back, friends, to our exploration of how rain can transform emotions, how it can free us to live from our more full wisdom and awake heart. Albert Einstein, one of his most well-known quotes goes like this. He says, "We live in an optical delusion of separation, and that this delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting our affections to just a few persons nearest to us." He says, "Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty." This all-embracing compassion, it's what I describe in my recent book as radical compassion, is really the heart of the spiritual path, and it's the medicine our world most needs. And while compassion is natural, it's a natural, already present expression of our true nature, it blossoms when we train ourselves, when we practice. So this is the essential gift of rain, that we can actually practice in a way that awakens compassion. And in today's session, we'll look at how we widen the circles of compassion. And I'd like to start with a story I love about a longtime prisoner at San Quentin prison in the United States. And he was a meditator. His name was Jarvis Masters, and he was in the exercise yard when a seagull landed in a puddle, and he saw a big young inmate pick up a stone to throw it at it. And the unspoken rule in the yard was to mind your own business, because even the smallest incident could turn violent. But Jarvis immediately raised his arm to stop the man from throwing the stone. And outraged, the guy shouted at him, "What are you doing?" And everybody was watching. They're expecting a fight. But Jarvis just responded in this way. He said, "That bird's got my wings." And the young man muttered and shook his head, but somehow the tension was dissipated. And for days afterwards, inmates were coming up to Jarvis to ask, "Well, what do you mean by that, Jarvis? That bird's got my wings." But you know, something in us really understands what Jarvis meant. That whenever we pay attention, close attention to another life, whether it's a person or a dog or a plant, that becomes part of us. It starts mattering to us, that life. We share the same wings, the same longing to live fully and freely. Yet it's important to look at how when our limbic brain, our survival brain's activated, then we get cut off from this capacity to pay attention and to feel care. And we can see how this happens in two different domains that I want to walk through with you. One domain, and they're both stress, is the stress that arises when we're around those who are different from us in race or political views or class or even a different species. We have deep conditioning to feel fear, to feel maybe dislike or disinterest when others are not part of our familiar cocoon of humans. And there's a lot of research that shows how that happens, because it's deep in our evolutionary conditioning. For millions of years, humans lived in small groups, and we were able to feel compassion and love for those in our group, but aversion and fear to those outside our group. And this was because there were limited resources. We needed to fight to survive. It was only 10 to 20,000 years ago that we had a profound spurt in our brain development, and it correlated with the capacity to extend affection beyond our kin group. So this is the all-important move from I to we, realizing our belonging to the collective whole, to a web of living beings. And this is hugely relevant in our trajectory for our survival and flourishing, because we can't evolve in a healthy way unless we collaborate and address our shared global concerns. The viral pandemic, genocides, climate change, economic injustice, and poverty. But as we know, when individuals and societies get caught in stress and fear, our most primitive conditioning takes over, and that leads to violence. We attack and oppress those of difference. Okay, so this is one of the ways that compassion gets shut down, our reactivity to people of difference, to those of difference. The second domain where compassion is cut off is when our daily stress activates the limbic system. Let's say you're rushing to meet a deadline, or you're anxious about finances, or feeling sick, or fearful of rejection, or angry at another's behavior. In those moments, there's a natural tendency to become self-focused and defended and cut off. There's a Buddhist cartoon I saw with a man at a bar, and he's saying, "I know I'm nothing, but I'm all that I can think about." And that's how it is when we're stressed. Mindfulness and compassion towards others diminishes. I mean, you might consider a recent time when you were under pressure, when you were busy, when you were preoccupied, and when you were with another person. And how present and empathetic were you in those moments? I know for myself, when I'm anxious about getting things done, or I'm worried about something coming up, I lose my sensitivity towards others. So, when we're stressed, our survival brain can take over and we're in a trance. Our mind narrows, our thinking gets rigid, our hearts become armored, and depending on the situation, others fall into one of three categories. Either they're perceived as an obstacle or a threat. For instance, somebody's making demands on our time, or they're judging us. Or they're perceived as a source of potential enhancement or gratification. They can give us approval or assistance or a raise in our salary. Or that person's unimportant to our wants and needs. From a Buddhist lens, others become objects of aversion, of grasping, or of neither, which leads to disinterest. But with any of these limbic reactions, they become an object. Others become unreal. We are cut off from their subjectivity, their vulnerability, their living human hearts. So this is our predicament. We have the capacity for compassion. It's our potential. It's intrinsic to our Buddha nature. But our conditioning to get hijacked by the limbic brain cuts it off. Now, of course, this is all developmental. As many of you know, self-centeredness it's a really natural part when we're younger in our developmental growth, and that, over time we also get trained by our society and our families to be more attentive to each other. I heard a story of a group of young children on a school trip, and one went up to the bus driver and handed the bus driver some peanuts. And the bus driver thanked the little girl and thought to themselves, "Oh, how caring. The children thought I was hungry." Well, it happened again. The little girl came up and offered another pile of peanuts. And again, the thank you. But when it happened the third time, the bus driver said, "Oh no, you children enjoy them. You keep them." And the little girl responded, "Oh, but we just want to suck the chocolate off of them." So it's entirely natural as we grow up that our motivations are mixed in dealing with others. And as we develop, it's possible to shift from that self-centeredness to we. So let's look now together at how rain can help us cultivate our compassion. And the training that wakes up compassion has two basic elements. And the first element is a mindful opening to suffering. In other words, allowing ourselves to be touched by suffering. And this happens during the recognize, allow, and investigate parts of rain. The second part of the training is to actively respond with care, and this happens during the nurturing. So we'll look at that, but I want to remind you that there's after the rain, which is after those 4 steps of rain. We rest with what has emerged, and during that time, there's a neural integration of an enlarged sense of being. In other words, the state of compassion can more and more become a trait of compassion, more enduring. Okay, let's look closer at our primary challenge to cultivating compassion, and that is our basic conditioning to pull away from pain. So compassion means to feel pain. We have to open to the pain, but we're conditioned and habituated to pull away from pain. So it takes an intentionality. It takes a real courageous willingness to practice leaning in towards what we avoid. Said more simply, we need to learn to feel feelings. I heard a story about a civil rights activist and theologian. Her name's Ruby Sales. And she was getting her hair done early one morning, and the hairdresser's daughter came in. She had spent the whole night on the streets hustling. So she had sores on her body, and she'd clearly been on drugs. And Ruby thought to herself, ask her where it hurts. So that's what she did. She said to the young woman, Shelley, where does it hurt? And just that simple question opened up Shelley to sharing things she had never even shared with her own mother about having been incested, how all the things that happened to her as a child. She shared the source of her pain. And for Ruby, she realized in that moment that she needed a larger, more compassionate way to do her work, and that it came down to being able to lean in to where the pain was and ask the question, where does it hurt? Now, that doesn't mean when we're with somebody else, we actually say the words out loud, but it means that we're interested and open to being in touch with their hurt. In order to open ourselves to others' vulnerability, we need to be intentional in this way. We need to turn towards the pain, to be asking a question, what's it like being you? What's it like being you? So, my friends, this is central as we bring the rain meditation to others in our life. And let me now explain how rain wakes up compassion with a story. I had one friend who directs a health clinic, and she was concerned about a nurse who was regularly at the center of conflict. Others complained that this nurse was edgy and oversensitive and defensive. And one day my friend had her own experience of that when this woman responded to a patient's complaint by blaming someone else. So my friend knew she needed to talk to her, but she wanted to do it with kindness and skill. So the night before they met, she practiced rain. And I'm sharing this story because you can practice rain before you engage in situations where you know you want to have access to your heart. So she practiced the night before, and she practiced the R of rain, recognizing this woman's behavior, her appearance, her expressions of irritation, and then allowing with a mindful presence, just letting that all be there, not judging, not looking away. And then she began investigating with her own inner inquiry. Well, what's it like being you? That question. And this helped her sense into the woman's pain, into the woman's insecurity, her feelings of deficiency, of not belonging, and how her hostility was actually covering over that vulnerability. That brought her to the N of rain, nurturing. And she nurtured by imagining that woman and her vulnerability right in her own heart and extending care, letting this woman be more real to her. So the next day, when she went to talk to her, she approached this woman with real curiosity and care. And something in that presence came across, because after asking a few questions about the woman's life, she got a much deeper sense of the challenges she was living with. She was a single mom on the edge of the poverty line, and she had all these fears of not managing, not making it, and then a resentment towards those who had it easier, who were more privileged. So before the meeting ended, my friend said to her, it sounds really hard. I appreciate how much you're carrying. It must be very difficult. This nurse teared up. You see, her deep need was for that pain to be understood and felt by another. The expression of care is true medicine. It reminds us of our belonging, so she felt more belonging. Mother Teresa has said that our great suffering is forgetting our belonging to one another. And rain gives us guidance in how to reconnect with our hearts. It deepens our attention so we can see more clearly what's going on within ourselves and within others. Let me now share with you some of the common difficulties people have in the process of trying to cultivate compassion. Many people ask me, well, how can I feel compassionate towards this other person if how they're acting is bringing up judgment in me, or maybe hurt or anger? It's helpful to think of compassion as widening circles that include the world, but that the life right here, our own hearts, are right at the center. And if there's inner reactivity, we need to start there. We need to always come back to our own feelings of reactivity if we're going to be able to bring compassion to other people. I'll give you a few examples. I had one student who had a teen, about 16 years old, who was struggling with his own insecurity and acting out with drug use. And before this man could respond to his son, he had to bring rein to his own feelings of anger and fear. Once he could hold them with a deeper presence, then he could sense how his son was having a hard time, how he was anxious and insecure about his future. And he could talk to him in a way that didn't come from blame and didn't create defensiveness. Another person had an elderly parent who was very lonely and also very demanding and critical. And before she could relate with compassion to her mom, she had to bring compassion to her own feelings of guilt and irritation. Another example, a woman's partner was laid off from work during the pandemic, and her partner was really angry and upset and short-tempered with everyone. And so for this woman to be compassionate towards her partner, first she had to bring compassion to her own feelings of anxiety and anger while being around her partner. So again, consider compassion as widening circles, and we have to include ourselves at the center over and over again. Otherwise, our compassion will be abstract. It won't be embodied, and it won't have power. It'll be mental. Okay, another challenge. People often bring this up. They tell me, Tara, my problem is not cutting off from others' feelings. I'm very sensitive. I'm very thin-skinned. In fact, I get overwhelmed by everybody else's pain. So just to say that the tendency toward overwhelm means that, in fact, we are very empathetic, but we need more time connecting with mindfulness. You see, there's a lot of research now about empathy and compassion and the difference. And this is something that's really valuable to understand. Empathy means you're feeling another person's feelings, and it's a really necessary capacity. It activates the limbic system. In other words, it feels painful. If we add mindfulness to it, empathy plus mindfulness equals compassion. Empathy plus mindfulness equals compassion. What happens then? Once we bring in some mindfulness, it activates the frontal cortex and it feels good. So we don't burn out. The difference between empathy and compassion is that compassion means that we're perceiving another's feelings from a more spacious, clear, and integrated state of mind. You might think of the difference between taking dye, let's say a purple dye, and putting it in a sink filled with water, and it would turn purple. But if you put that same dye in a lake, it won't turn colors in the same way. The lake's clarity won't get lost. So back to the question, when people are sensitive, if you happen to be a very sensitive person and you're empathetic but you're easily overwhelmed, what's needed is more emphasis on connecting to the lake, a more open, spacious attention. And this mindfulness enables you to have a tender yet non-reactive presence. It gives space for suffering. Otherwise, the suffering of our world will be too much. Okay, one more challenge I'll mention, and that's this, that for compassion to be alive, for it to not be abstract and mental, but to be alive, we have to feel in our body, in our heart, touched. We need to feel moved by another's pain. And yet, we're often dissociated, and it's hard to feel feelings. I've had so many people tell me how difficult it is to actually feel feelings. So I want to recommend, as an ongoing part of your practice, if it's hard for you to feel feelings, is to practice the mindful body scan. And if you go to my website, I've got many meditations, free meditations with the mindful body scan. And it really will support you in your compassion practice, getting more in your body. And then during the compassion practice itself, which we'll be doing, a helpful way to support your attention is wherever you feel the vulnerability in your body, put your hand there and just let your touch accompany it, and also breathe with it. Feel your breath coming in and out of that place. The breath can be a powerful support, both to help you get more in touch with your body, but also to help you get more connected to that lake, that bigger space of awareness. And the way it can support you is as you breathe in right into the body and where you're feeling vulnerability. And as you breathe out, let all of that vulnerability go out with the out-breath and be held in that great sky of awareness, the more spacious presence. This is a common way that compassion practice is taught in the Tibetan tradition. It's called Tonglen. And when we practice, you'll see how it can serve you during the investigation part of rain. Now, we started with a story. That bird has my wings. And we've been exploring how we can awaken connectedness with each other and all living beings, how we can deepen our attention with mindfulness open to the suffering and feel that nurturing and that care. As mentioned, a universal obstacle is that when people are very different from us, we tend to cut off the compassion. We revert to that primitive brain, and they become unreal others. And their vulnerability and their basic goodness get obscured. I want to share with you a story that taught me a lot about this. A minister describes a family trip. They were traveling on Christmas Day, her husband, 2 children, and they decided to stop at a restaurant. It was nearly empty. She sat her youngest son, or 1-year-old Eric, in a high chair, and suddenly she heard him squeal with glee. "Hi there." 2 words he thought were one. "Hi there." His face was alive with excitement. And she writes this. She says, "I saw the source of his merriment, and my eyes could not take it in at once. A tattered rag of a coat, baggy pants, both they and the zipper at half-mast over a spindly body, gums as bare as Eric's, hair uncombed, unwashed, and his hands were waving in the air, flapping about. 'Hi there, baby. Hi there, big boy. I see you, Buster.' My husband and I exchanged a look that was a cross between 'what do we do?' and 'poor devil.' Eric continued to laugh and answer, 'Hi there.' Every call was echoed. This old geezer was creating a nuisance with my beautiful baby. I shoved a cracker at Eric and he pulverized it on the tray. I whispered, 'Why me?' under my breath. Our meal came and the nuisance continued. Now the old bum was shouting from across the room. 'Do you know patty cake? Attaboy! Do you know peekaboo? Hey, look, he knows peekaboo.' We ate in silence, except Eric, who was running through his repertoire for the admiring applause of a Skid Row bum. Finally, we had enough. Dennis went to pay the check, imploring me to get Eric and meet me in the parking lot. I trundled Eric out of the high chair and looked toward the exit. The old man sat poised and waiting, his chair directly between me and the door. "Lord, just let me out of here before he speaks to me or Eric." I headed towards the door. It soon became apparent that both the Lord and Eric had other plans. As I drew closer to the man, I turned my back, walking to sidestep him and any air he might have been breathing. As I did so, Eric, all the while with his eyes riveted to his best friend, leaned far over my arm, reaching with both arms in a baby pick-me-up position. In a split second of balancing my baby and turning to counter his weight, I came eye to eye with the old man. Eric was lunging for him, arms spread wide. The bum's eyes both asked and implored, "Would you let me hold your baby?" There was no need for me to answer, since Eric propelled himself from my arms to the man's. Suddenly, a very old man and a very young baby were involved in a love relationship. Eric laid his tiny head upon the man's ragged shoulder. The man's eyes closed, and I saw tears hover beneath his lashes. His aged hands, full of grime and pain and hard labor, gently, so gently, cradled my baby's bottom and stroked his back. I stood awestruck. The old man rocked and cradled Eric in his arms for a moment, and then his eyes opened and set squarely on mine. He said in a firm, commanding voice, "You take care of this baby." Somehow I managed, "I will," from a throat that contained a stone. He pried Eric from his chest, unwillingly, longingly, as though he was in pain. I held my arms open to receive my baby, and again the gentleman addressed me. "God bless you, ma'am. You've given me my Christmas gift." I said nothing more than a muttered thanks. With Eric back in my arms, I ran for the car. Dennis wondered why I was crying and holding Eric so tightly, and why I was saying, my God, forgive me." So whether it's due to our differences in class or race, or gender, ethnicity, religion, even those of us most dedicated to being awake and compassion, we're conditioned. We have unconscious biases, feelings of superior or inferior. We have a way of continually creating caste systems, hierarchies, and unreal others everywhere on earth. I mean, right now you might ask yourself honestly, am I able to see that bird has my wings in all humans, in non-humans? This is our spiritual potential, and it's our great evolutionary task as humans to wake up out of that habit of separating, out of superior, inferior, and to really sense the gold, sense that sacredness that's shining through all beings. You know, our human brains have accomplished so much, but they're also responsible for so much cruelty within our species and towards other species, to the extent of threatening to destroy our home, this earth. It's only by awakening our caring for all living beings, including our living earth, that will then act in ways to protect and to heal. So this is the essence of the Bodhisattva path, the path of awakening beings, to call forth our reverence for life. And the hopeful news is we can train our hearts and minds in ways that bring this about. We can create the world that we believe in. So we'll practice now awakening compassion for others with rain. And please know as we do that this is a life practice. At home, at work, it takes courage, it takes patience, and real acceptance for the ways that we habitually push away other people's pain. And yet you can trust that as you step forward on this path, you're actually manifesting the truth and the goodness of who you really are. What helps, remember that you're not alone. You're joined by countless others who long to know our connectedness and to long to have our lives be really an expression of love in action, bringing love into our world. So my friends, before we practice, I want to thank you for your attention. It's really been a pleasure to explore how meditation can be a medicine for our times and to introduce you to the practice of rain. And it's been a delight to join those in South Korea and beyond in this wonderful conference. I wish you all blessings as you continue on the path. And now for our final practice, awakening compassion with rain. I'd like to invite you to sit in a way that allows you to be relaxed, at ease, and also alert. You might close your eyes and let go of any habitual tension that you notice. Perhaps relaxing your face, letting there be a slight smile at the lips. Letting the shoulders fall away from the neck. And feeling inside the shoulders, maybe sensing a dissolving, an ice to water melting. And then water to gas. Softening your hands, letting them rest in an easy, effortless way. Letting the chest be open, and the belly loose, relaxed. Allowing your whole body and mind to settle. Now take a few moments to scan through the people you regularly encounter in your life. And choose someone you know who's having a difficult time. It might be someone who's struggling with issues at home or at work, with loneliness, anxiety, or depression, maybe with health challenges or financial struggles, or perhaps the suffering and trauma that come with belonging to a non-dominant group in our society. Once you have this person in mind, take a few moments to sense your intention to deepen your compassion towards them. Now begin by honestly looking at how you typically relate to them in their difficulty. You might notice if you have any negative reaction to them. Perhaps something like believing, well, they should be different, or it's their fault, or this is too much for me to handle. Maybe you feel powerless to help or afraid of being overwhelmed. If you sense any reactivity inside you, first begin by bringing self-compassion and forgiveness to your own experience. You might put your hand on your heart and feel what's going on inside you. And send kind of a warm energy to wherever you feel vulnerable or reactive. Perhaps some silent words or message of care to yourself. And now with rain, we'll bring attention to this person. The R, or recognize, means becoming aware of whatever is most predominant about this person that lets you know they're having a hard time. Perhaps you're recalling the look on their face, how they talk to you or interact with others, words they've sent you in an email or communication otherwise. Whatever reminds you of them in difficulty. And as you do, try to get an image of them having a hard time. So recognizing this person in difficulty and allowing what you see to be there. Letting your sense of this person, how they're feeling, how they're expressing themselves, just be right here as it is, without adding anything or trying to fix anything. And we begin to investigate with gentleness and interest, exploring what's it like being you? Where does it hurt? And you might deepen your attention as you sense this kind of inquiry and wonder about this person. Well, what are you believing about yourself or your life that's causing pain? Perhaps they're believing that they're failing in some way, that they're unworthy, unlovable. You might continue to investigate, sensing, well, what are the fears, the shame, the disappointments or hurts that you're carrying? Try to feel into the other person. What's the painful emotions they're living with? It helps if you visualize them close in, see their eyes, see the expression on their face when they're having a hard time. What's the suffering you may be feeling related to your group identity, your race, sexual orientation, gender identity, class? Is there a feeling of not belonging in some way? And in a deep way, the inquiry is, what does it feel like emotionally to be you? And as you feel into that, letting your body be awake and open, you might sense what it is that this person most needs to experience right now. What would be healing? Is it a feeling of safety? A feeling accompanied? A feeling loved? Valued? Feeling what they need, feeling what it's like to be them, and if it helps to deepen your presence with them, to feel the breath, you might put your hand wherever you feel vulnerability, and breathe in and imagine and feel and connect with their vulnerability, with what they feel, with the in-breath. And then breathe out and let that vulnerability out. Let it be held in that open space, the sea of awareness, to the whole field of a listening, caring presence. So breathing in and feeling touched by another's pain. And breathing out and sensing that pain being held in the vastness of caring presence. The sea of awareness. And sense that your being can inhabit that open heart space, that sea of awareness. That they're a wave within you. As you begin to nurture, as you begin to send your care to them, offering some message of kindness, what you feel might be most healing. You might mentally whisper, "I'm sorry, and I love you." Or, "My heart is with you." Or, "May you be free from suffering." Whatever care you offer, imagine this person receiving and benefiting from your care. Offering care energetically and with words, and imagining them receiving that loving presence and benefiting. And now take a moment to imagine all those who are suffering in this same way, all those who are feeling fearful, who are feeling separate and lonely, or who are feeling upset and rejected, who are feeling like failures. Imagine all who are suffering in the way of this person you've been meditating on. And sense your spacious open heart including them all, like an ocean including all the waves, holding with care. Notice how there's room. In After the Rain, now we let go of all ideas of others and simply notice the qualities of heart and presence that are right here. Notice if there's a sense of openness, tenderness, compassion, a wakeful heart. With whatever you find, just let go and be that tender presence. Getting familiar with this awake and tender heart, this space of loving, as it's more the truth of who we are than any stories we tell ourselves. It's home. And before ending the meditation, you might imagine next encountering this person with an increased sensitivity and care and presence. Notice what it's like. And as you're ready, you might take a few full breaths and then open your eyes. And then if you feel inclined, please journal about what is challenging and what you are learning from this compassion practice with rain.